Hello, everybody, and welcome to WTF Fantasy Football Podcast. Unfortunately, this is our first night back, and we are running into technical difficulties everywhere. Still trying to get Tony Cincotta on the line. But while we wait for Tony, I brought in a couple of guests that are going to help me fill some time, and I'll get to them in a second. But if you haven't noticed, if you haven't had your eyes open, if nobody's been watching you watching it, then you might have missed the all new full time fantasy podcast network that is all over the place right now. We are exploding, people. We're up to 14 podcasts, over 26 hours of weekly content each and every week, and we're still growing. It's going to be awesome. You can follow us on Twitter, use the hashtag FTFPodNet, and you'll get to see everything we do from all the different podcasts. You can go to Full Time Fantasy, check out the radio link, and there's a page there for each and every podcast. You can follow them there. Anywhere you want to follow us, iTunes, iHeart, Spotify, we're everywhere. Just make sure you give us a thumbs up or a 5 rating or whatever you can do. Comments, all of that stuff is good. We'll take whatever we can get as we try to grow this network. So there is that. So let's bring on our two guests. Of course, both of these gentlemen are now members of our podcast network. So it's good to have that on. And I'll start with Mr. Bob Lung, Mr. Consistency himself. Bob, how you doing tonight?
Good, man. Thanks for having me jump on here. I just happened to be sitting in front of the computer, and you said, hey, Tony Cincotta couldn't come on, and I'm honored to even be
on any minute now. I never know with Tony, but he's having some
I'm
issues.
honored to even be mentioned in the same sentence with that guy. So yeah, that's a big deal.
Hey, Tony's the one who gave me my first shot at doing radio. So he and I go all the way back to the beginning for me. And then, of course, our second guest is Mr. Dwayne McFarland, the man who says that context does indeed matter. How you doing, Dwayne?
I'm good. That feels so much weaker than Mr. Consistency. I think Bob's got the better marketing name.
Yeah, well, I've been doing it for 16 years, so I get precedence.
All I got to say is I've seen all the covers of all the different magazines out this year, and
they're beautiful.
Bob's
are beautiful.
I love Bob's cover. It just jumps right off at you and just stares you in your face like, I dare you not to read me.
Yeah, it's funny because the guy that's done it for the last 3 years for me, his name's Brian Maz. He's out of California. I don't remember who introduced me to him. And the funny thing was this year after he did it, he goes, I'm thinking about doing something different. I want to put a real person on it. I go, no, everybody loves your covers, man. There's no way we're going away from the robot or the robo, kind of badass looking guy. I go, I don't want to have a real player on there. I said, that's no fun. Everybody loves this cover. I said, we got to just keep changing up the color schemes and the backgrounds or whatever. But so he always comes up with something amazing. So I'm sure we'll come up with it. So I can't take any credit for it. I just say, do it. And he makes it and I add the words and it always jumps off the page. So
well, there you go. That's the guy to have in your back pocket when you
absolutely
need him. So let's jump into something. I feel like I've been talking about him for a couple of days now, so I want to hear your opinions, guys. What are your thoughts on Todd Gurley right now? Dwayne, give us what are you thinking? How or when are you drafting him? How big is the concern for you? Come on, spill it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think he's at the point now where ADP, a month ago, folks were talking about, do you take him at 112? And I think it was tougher there just because some of the other options. But I think now, if you're looking at him at the end of the second, I did, a draft, a mid-stakes draft last week. And, it was like a $300 entry, pretty serious people for this time of year. And he went at 3-4. So I think at that point, he becomes a value because I think now you're talking about, as long as he doesn't just injure his knee during the season, I mean, you're cutting 25% off of his production, and I think his ADP reflects that. Now he's going in the range of guys like Leonard Fournette, Keenan Allen. So at that point, I think you can put together a viable strategy to play him, to pick him as an upside play. And then turn around and you're gonna have to make up for it later. But I like a lot of receivers this year right now between rounds 8 and 12. So you could apply the same strategy to picking someone like a Darrell Henderson. The problem is you can't pair them together because Darrell Henderson's ADP has shot up so far. It's gonna cost you too much equity to take both.
And I agree with that, but I'll get into more of that in a minute. Bob, what's your thoughts on Gurley?
Well, like you said, I haven't been in a draft where I've seen Todd go that late yet. And I think if I was sitting, so last night I was doing a draft for the fantasy football guide that Peter Kreutzer and the guys all put out. Tom Kesnick was in this, Howard Bender, etc. I had the number 1 pick overall, and I was really hoping after I took Zeke that I could pick Gurley at the turn at 2-3. But he didn't even make it out of the first round. He still went 7th overall. So I haven't been in a draft to see him go that low. I haven't even seen him go in the 2nd round yet. So maybe I'm just not in the right drafts yet, like Dwayne has. But, I guess if he, like I said, if he was going to fall to me at the end of round 2 and I already have Zeke, well, of course, that's, now I know that even if I get, let's say I get 70% consistency out of Todd Gurley, as long as I have Zeke with 95%, then that's a great thing. I mean, that's all I really want as my RB2 is that 75% consistency. And if Gurley's sitting there, I think I'm still going to get it just because of the, his pass receiving talent. They're still going to use him. Like you said, they're going to cut back. They're going to use Henderson some, but I think that they're just keeping him fresh, keeping him, kind of, at bay. And then, I think he'll still be a solid player, but he's definitely not the Todd Gurley of old. And we just have to accept that.
Okay. Well, again, I've been talking about it for the last few days on my morning news, but I'm going to talk it again if you missed it. I don't agree. I don't agree. I don't think he's going to fall anywhere near as far as people are predicting right now. Sure, they'll tone back his touches. He won't get 300 plus anymore. I agree with that. But he's still going to see anywhere between 225 and 250, I believe. And because now they know how to deal with it. Now they know that he doesn't need to work in OTAs. He doesn't need to work in training camp. He doesn't need to work in preseason. The man knows the offense inside and out. There's nothing he needs to do on that field to get out there and get himself hurt or just to build up on the wear and tear. So they will definitely manage that. But in this offense, with him still getting most of the goal line touches, with him still being involved in the passing game, and look, I like Darrell Henderson, but there's still some risk with him. He needs to improve his pass blocking. He runs a little too upright for me. There's things there that need to be worked on. I'm not sure he's ready to come in there and just take the reins away from Todd Gurley as people are predicting. I think that's ridiculous. So for me, if I can get him anywhere in the second, even 201, I'd take Todd Gurley in an instant. If he's my second player on my team, I love that each and every day.
Right.
If you're talking 3rd round, I mean, that to me, that's unbelievable value.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and like I said, that's with a pretty serious group. So no telling how many drafts those guys have already done. Which, if they own a lot of Todd Gurley already, some of that can be you're seeing diversification. But in that format, I've seen him make it to 212 multiple times. It's getting to where it's regular. Now I haven't held a pick where it worked out the right way for me, but at the end of the 2nd round, I'm definitely pulling the trigger. I have one question on it, Jim, that I think might kind of concrete it for people. What's the players? Let's say it's a full PPR league. Bob, what's the player where you draw the line that once this guy's gone, Todd Gurley is my selection?
I would say at this point, probably James Conner. So I mean, right now I have Gurley ranked 9th. After Zeke, Barkley, McCaffrey, Kamara, Gordon, Johnson, Bell, Connor. I don't know if I would pick Mixon or Cook or Freeman over him at this point. So, but like I said, I haven't been in a draft where he's gotten to that point for me. So we'll have to wait and see. Maybe I'll play a couple more best balls this week and see where he's at.
How about you, Jim?
Well, for me, look, it really doesn't come down to that. For me, I'm always just trying to figure out where can I get that best value. And I'm not really worried about who. I mean, I still have him in that 2nd tier. The 1st tier for me is Barkley, Elliott, Kamara, and McCaffrey. That's my top tier. The 2nd tier is Gurley, Gordon, David Johnson, Connor, and Mixon. And then my 3rd tier starts with Bell. But I got to be honest, man. I've seen Bell going before Gurley, and I'm not ready to buy into that. I understand the issues with Gurley. I do. There's a risk there. But there's a risk with Bell, too. And again, I've been talking about this a lot, but I'm going to go over it one more time. You're talking about a guy who went from a team that had a Pro Bowl quarterback, Pro Bowl wide receiver, one of the best offensive lines in the game, a great offensive game plan, to a team that has a second-year quarterback who, while I think it will get better and continue to get better, I like him, but he's still a second-year quarterback, going to make mistakes. He doesn't have any of the offensive weapons around him that he had in Pittsburgh. And you're talking about an offensive line for the Jets that's probably one of the worst in the league. One of the things about Bell is that he's always been a patient runner. He likes to work behind that line till he finds the right hole, and then he's gone. He won't have that luxury with the Jets. He's got to be able to become a much more decisive runner. He has to hit that hole in a hurry, because if he sits there and tries to play patty cake trying to figure out where the hole is, the next thing he sees is going to be a defensive lineman in his face.
Jim, let me ask you this. I kind of see Bell this year as I saw Barkley last year, where the offense around him isn't that great. I mean, let's be honest, Eli wasn't that great anymore. That offensive line wasn't that great. Beckham was hurt most of the season, so they didn't really have a great passing game. He would only get some games 30, 40 yards rushing, but he'd get 8 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown, and he was always, in the top, 12 in fantasy. I can see Bell basically being that way this year, is that he's not going to get a lot of rushing yards because the teams are going to be smart enough. But I think that the Jets are going to be throwing the ball to him a lot out of the backfield. And I think he'll almost score most of his fantasy points on a more of a PPR standpoint on the passing game than he's going to in the rushing game. What are your thoughts? And Dwayne as well.
Well, go to Dwayne. Let's see what he says.
No, I agree that he's going to be using the passing game. I am with
I don't think there's anybody out there who doesn't think.
Yeah,
but we're also dealing with a second-year quarterback that he hasn't really learned that real tendency to check down to that running back yet.
Yeah, so, but he didn't have the running back last year to do it with either.
Yeah, exactly, and he actually did. He actually did throw it a lot to the backs last year. So it's more than what people think.
I don't remember that at all.
And now you add Crowder. As a nice slot weapon. Anunwan's your Z weapon. You've got Robbie Anderson downfield. Not to mention Sam Darnold finished out the year really strong. He stopped throwing picks.
I agree. Absolutely. I said that this morning. It almost seemed like the injury helped him, because he took that time off from the injury, and then maybe the game slowed down for him because he wasn't like in his face. He finally got a break, and it seemed like when he came back, the game slowed down for him. And I agree, he played really good down the stretch. The last 4 games were excellent for him, and see that trend continue. It's more Bell's rushing style. It just bothers me behind this offensive line. I can't get past that for some reason.
Yeah, I hear you.
So let's grab another topic that Tony and I were going to talk about. Worried about Russell Wilson at all in fantasy this year after losing Baldwin? I know they brought in, Metcalf and a couple other pieces to try and fill those gaps, but I'll start with you this time, Bob. What's your thoughts on Russell Wilson this year? And are you worried about this Seahawks offense?
I'm not, because I don't see it really being any different than we saw last year. I mean, Baldwin was either playing hurt or not on the field hurt most of the year. They start off a little slow. Wilson would 1 for 4 in his first 4 games for clutch games, so 25% consistency, but then was red hot and went 80% the rest of the year consistency wise. He makes up most of his points on his legs. He was still top 10 in both fantasy points and consistency. And they're going to continue to run the ball with Chris Carson. They're going to use Rashad Penny more to replace Mike Davis. Tyler Lockett filled in very well when Baldwin was hurt most of the season anyway. David Moore wasn't a bad number 2. They got Metcalf. I think really not much changes, and I think Wilson will be he's a low-end QB1. I'm not going to draft him ahead of, I know some people might pick him in top 5, but, I have him ranked right now, I think 8th or 9th or 10th overall. So, he's a back-end QB1 for me. It just depends on where he falls and where the picks are. And, he isn't on a lot of my teams right now because I've either picked like like last night, I picked Andrew Luck at the beginning of the 6th round because it was a 14 team and I didn't want to get stuck. Or I'm picking, 2 late quarterbacks like, Roethlisberger and Winston, and I'm just going to use my theory that I created called consistently streaming this year, and just basically intermix them and stream them based on their consistency at home and away.
Fair enough. How about you, Dwayne?
Yeah, I don't really see anything to be too concerned about. And the only reason I say that is just because Russell Wilson has been overcoming the lack of really good targets since he started. He's just never really had great options. Now, Doug Baldwin did turn into, his trusted security blanket, but they're moving Tyler Lockett all over the formation. Tyler Lockett last year, when he played out of the slot, was actually phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm super excited about that guy this year. Unfortunately, his ADP is starting to creep up, but I'm with Bob. My strategy around quarterback is I'm typically waiting, and if the quarterbacks that go around Russell Wilson, I'm typically choosing someone else, like an Andrew Luck or a Baker Mayfield. And Wilson's going right behind those guys, but you'll see him sometimes pop up ahead of them.
Right.
But for the most part, I'm staying away from. I don't draft quarterbacks early. I really haven't, ever in my life, and the strategy is probably the best it's ever. It's the best time I can remember ever to just wait.
Yeah, right. I agree. There's so many good quarterbacks in this. I'll tell you, when I did my projections and I went through them all and went back and looked at them, man, I'm having a hard time getting Wilson in my top 12. And it's not because I'm not, I'm killing his numbers. I'm giving him about his average numbers. But I'm just looking at these other quarterbacks that have a chance to put up, I think bigger numbers in the offenses that they're running. If we were seeing Wilson still run, for 500 yards or more every year, that would balance it out. But we've seen that decrease in the last couple of years. So, that hurts him a little bit on the fantasy side. I mean, don't get me wrong. Russell Wilson is like one of my favorite quarterbacks in the freaking league. I love the guy. I mean, you just don't see him make a bad decision too often at all.
Can you imagine what he would be like if he actually had like 3 good receivers?
Oh God, you kidding me?
And a good offensive line.
Yeah. I mean, I love the guy. Don't get me wrong.
Right. Oh, I do too.
Some of these other offenses. I mean, you mentioned Baker Mayfield. I mean, that offense should be great. I mean, it really should. On paper, it looks awesome. Whether it comes together like that, different story. We'll see. If all those egomaniacal divas can come together and play together, we'll see if that works out that way. We've seen other teams, supposedly have that great team on paper that didn't really come together. And yeah, that's right. I'm looking at you, Eagles dream team. It turned into a nightmare really quickly, didn't you guys? I don't know. Like I said, I love Russell Wilson, one of my favorite quarterbacks, absolutely one of my favorites.
Well, like you said, the tough thing is going to be the fact that last year, his passing attempts, because they ran the ball so much, dropped 23%. And if it wasn't for the fact that he had a 35-7 touchdown interception rate, if he doesn't throw 35 touchdowns, he's not going to make the top 10. So, let's say he only throws, 30. I mean, right there's 30 points. He's probably out of the top 10, maybe out of the top 12. And if they get more rushing touchdowns and the offensive line's a little bit better, I just feel like it's tough. Like you said, it's tough putting him. I have him in the top 10 just because I feel like he might be close. But the defense obviously has lost a lot of the boom.
A lot of firepower.
A lot of boom has been gone. And so I feel like they're going to be playing from behind a lot. Maybe not way behind because they'll hopefully be running the ball like they did very well last year with Carson and Penny and those guys. So that they might, at least control the ball, control the game a little bit better. But, I just don't know if he can do that 35 touchdowns again.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned. I am a little concerned. I actually wrote a piece where I called him a bust, but not a real bust, just somebody who's not going to return the value that people still put on him.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that.
Per attempt last year, so I always track, what are the touchdowns per attempt? Last year was his career year. So I think you have to expect some regression, to Bob's point.
It has to. How could him and Lockett be that perfect again?
But what I'll say is Russell Wilson, his touchdowns per attempt, I mean, he puts up, I've actually never seen, I'm going to go look at this. I bet there's not another quarterback in the league that in this amount of time has put up a mark over 6%. He's 6.7, 6.4, then he had a 4.4, then he had a 7%, then he had a 4%, but then he had a 6.1 and then an 8.2. That's
wow,
ridiculous.
8.2
given the
8.2
weapons
last year.
That was
Yeah,
last
8.2
year.
last year. Yeah,
8.2. So it's going to come down, but I think, what would it put him at, Bob, if you put him at 6% based on the attempts you've got him at? That's going to probably put him right around, like 30, 32 touchdowns, somewhere in there. So, I mean, I never count him out, but I do. It's to your point, Jim. There are just other offenses I like better. He makes my top 12 as number 12, but mostly he's sitting at 12. I have guys actually ranked with more points behind him, but I trust him more. I trust him. I have Kyler Murray at a few points more. I have Jameis Winston at a few points more. Actually, I have Mitch Trubisky right with him. I have Lamar Jackson right with him. I have Dak Prescott right with him, but I trust him over all those guys.
Well, his consistency's always been there. I mean, he's always been in around 70% every year. In fact, back-to-back years, he's done 69%, 11 for 16 both years. 2 years ago, you remember he was number one in total points and still had the same consistency this year or in 2018, even though he's ranked 10th in total points. So like you said, you can count on him. And that's what I like about him. And that's why he's number 8 on my book at this point, just because of that consistency.
I tell you though, I mean, I'm kind of jumping all over Jameis Winston, and I've never been a Jameis Winston guy. I'll be honest, I've never been that guy, but I love Bruce Arians. I love what Bruce Arians brings to an offense, and the fact that he doesn't care. He's going to throw that ball downfield all freaking day long, and he don't care. He's going to spread it down those seams all the time, keep these guys involved. Winston's going to have some, bad games. That's Winston. But in this offense, he's going to put up some monster numbers this year. And, because of that, I have him just ahead of Wilson. I have Winston at 12, where I have Wilson at 13.
Yeah, I agree. Winston 11, and so he's 2 behind, he's 2 behind Wilson, but it's only just because of the Winston factor. Like you just know he's going to do something stupid. Last year between the getting benched and then suspensions and all his mess, but he went 5 out of 6 in clutch games the last 6 games of the year. That's without Bruce Arians. So, you bring in Arians and now maybe Winston's got his head on straight. I'm with you too. I have him in the top, like I said, I have him 11. So he's in my top 12. And a lot of people look to me, have already said to me, how can you put Winston ahead of Brady? I'm like, how can I not?
Yeah, really. Not only that, I mean, if you look at them last year, both him and Fitzmagic, I mean, together, the two of them came out as a top 5 quarterback.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
They were putting up points like crazy.
In this offense, it's perfect for what Jameis Winston does. It's what you said, Jim. It's pushing the ball down the field. Bruce Arians, some coaches just adapt to their players and they change their scheme all the time.
No.
Bruce Arians does not. But he knows how to get the guys he wants, and he handpicked going to Tampa, I guarantee you. So if you look at Bruce Arians' average depth of target, over all the way back to his time in Pittsburgh as an offensive coordinator, this is insane. 10.1, 10.2, 11.3, 10.8, 9.8, 10.8, 9.6, 9.9, 9.7, 9.7, 10.5. Those are all top 25% in the league every year. He pushes the ball down the field. No doubt.
So, I agree. I loved him for that.
Hey, Bruce Arians got Carson Palmer into the Arizona Cardinals Ring of Hall of Fame.
Yeah, really.
If anybody can, that in itself deserves
the downside to Arians' offense, he's only had 2 years ever as a coordinator or head coach where he's got his quarterback over 30 touchdowns. So one was in 2007 with the Steelers. He got to 34. And in 2015, Bob, to your point, you're talking about the guy, Carson Palmer, he got to 35. Otherwise,
but he had quite a few years in that span. He was dealing with multiple quarterbacks because of injuries.
No, not all of them. There's some of those years, but
at least 1 or 2 of those years in Pittsburgh where he had to deal with Roethlisberger missing some time.
Yeah, one of the years.
One of the years.
Was it?
Yeah.
Sorry,
I don't have it in front of me.
I do, but it's okay. You're right. There was a year. It was 2000.
I just knew it's in the back of my head.
Yeah, it's in there for a good reason. Yeah, but his quarterback rating in those years, 100, 98, 95, 90, he had good quarterback play overall in Pittsburgh. Indianapolis was a rookie year of Andrew Luck, and there really weren't any weapons besides Reggie Wayne. T.Y. Hilton was just a rookie, so you got to give him a bit of a pass there. I'm just saying, the one thing you got to watch out for, it is a vertical offense, but I would argue that he's probably never had three weapons like O.J. Howard, Chris Godwin, and Mike Evans. That he's had some good weapons, but those are elite weapons, and they're also really good weapons in the red zone.
Well, like I said, I got him at 12, and I still only got him with 26 passing touchdowns, but I got him over 4,000 yards, actually over 4,200 yards. And then I got also a couple hundred yards rushing and a couple of rushing touchdowns. So
yeah,
puts him right up in that number.
That's fair.
Yeah, I try to be conservative with mine, but you can't just ignore the upside possibilities.
Right.
So it's such a, we all know it's such a fine line to try and walk when you're talking projections. I mean, it's tough. There's no doubt about it. The guys that get it right, all the time are the guys that never take their head out of an Excel spreadsheet, and that's not me. Mr. Mike Clay, I'm looking at you. Yes, I am.
Well, it's his full-time job. I mean, I look at Excel all day long, but that's because I'm an accountant.
Well, hey, he used to be an accountant too.
I know he does.
Did this as full-time job.
Trust me, he's my idol. That's for sure. I wouldn't be there.
So yeah, it's like, yeah, we all do, but you just got to invent your own stats.
That's it. Hello, what do you think I'm looking at?
I hear you. I know you're the consistency guy.
Yeah, I didn't invent it. I just fine-tuned it.
So let's see. Somebody else. I lost my list. Give me a minute. What are you guys doing at tight end in New England? You think Matt Lacoste is a guy to invest in? You think Steven Alexander has any chance? You think Watson, after the 4-game suspension, comes back and is suddenly rejuvenated? Or do they possibly go out and get somebody else?
I think within the next month they trade for Kyle Rudolph.
Oh, I would love to see that.
That would be perfect for both teams. Then they can, because they need to free up some cap space in Minnesota. Rudolph with Brady would be just beautiful, and then Irv Smith can be the guy for Cousins. But they didn't throw to Rudolph at all last year, so they don't
I know
that's tight end. So why not? Why would you keep both of them? I mean, that would totally be a perfect scenario. I don't care if you only get a bag of rocks for Kyle Rudolph.
Yeah.
Get rid of the cap money. He goes off and becomes a solid, reliable tight end for Brady. I think it'd be a perfect thing. That's what I think is going to happen. I don't think they're going to go. They can't go into the season with Matt Lacoste as their starting tight end. There's just no way.
Hey, this is the Patriots. You can't say no way with the
that's
Patriots.
True. You're right.
They've can't say no way. Done that year after year with wide receiver. They just had really good luck getting Gronk. Gronk
but they always go out. But let's be honest, they always go out and get that veteran who's on the way down, and they bring him back. Ben Watson, whoever that case may be. They've done that so many times with players on offense and defense, and I think Rudolph is the perfect scenario for them at this point.
No, I agree. It'd be great for them in the red zone. Absolutely, be a steal there. Boy, all those people that didn't want to draft him this year would be PO'd. Because that would be a perfect landing spot. I agree. And that, I was PO'd when they drafted Smith. If they're not going to trade Rudolph, I mean, why have them both around? Like you said, they didn't utilize Rudolph enough. Right. What are they going to do with Irv Smith? What's your thoughts over there, Dwayne? You've been mighty quiet.
Oh no, I'm letting you guys are making a lot of great points. I 100%. I agree with both of you. I mean, if Kyle Rudolph, if that worked out, it would be a great fit for both teams. For a lot of different reasons. I think as far as it stands now, depends on how big of a league you're in. If I'm in a league where I'm going 20 rounds in a draft, I might take a stab at a Lacoste or a Ben Watson late. Probably not Watson because I don't want to hold him through the 4 weeks. I want to be active, on the waiver wire. So, I mean, I guess he'd make an easy drop, but then it's like, why even draft him if you're not going to get to see? So I might, take a stab at Lacoste, since he'll likely be the starter week 1 if they don't make a trade. The bigger way I'm approaching the Patriots is I just think James White is the number 2 target on the team. I think it's Julian Edelman, then it's going to be James White, then it's going to be Harry as of right now. So the way I'm thinking about it is it's just not going to be the tight ends. The Patriots are smart. They know how to utilize their players. I think you even saw this last year whenever they had trouble, had some injuries out of the gate at different spots. And I mean, James White's numbers in those games are insane. He's seeing, Alvin Kamara type targets, and he's getting targets down the field. So I think right now, James White's a great buy in round 5, round 6 of fantasy drafts.
I think Dorsett is going to be a late round sleeper too, because, he has some decent, targets in most of the games. I may not set the fantasy world on fire, but again, kind of that trusted veteran that they always like to have. I think Dorsett could, be the guy that could stretch the field a little bit, while Harry kind of learns the ropes. We already know you're going to get 10 catches and 100 yards out of, his Edelman every game. So I think Dorsett, I picked, in fact, at the draft I did last night for that magazine, round 15. Yeah, round 15. I took Dorsett as my wide receiver 5. I think that's
why not? Take a shot.
Yeah,
I agree.
Right.
Absolutely. If he does hit, then you're golden. If not, you didn't invest anything in him.
Right.
I agree with that. Look, see, I'm a little concerned with James White. I agree with everything you said about what his play last year and the fact that the team does love him. I get all that. But last year was definitely, that was his career year. He had 123 targets last year. You have to go back to 2016 when that was his previous high, which was 86. And he had 7 touchdowns last year. Again, you go back to 2016, he had 5. That was his previous high. So I'm just worried that he comes down a little bit. I think people are drafting him too early because a lot of his damage was done last year when Sony Michel was injured. And there were games when Sony Michel was on the field where White wasn't putting up those numbers that we were seeing from him in the beginning.
Yeah, last year, James White ripped off 9 straight clutch games for consistency purposes. From week 10 on, he only earned 3. And then the playoffs, he was pretty much, invisible other than, a few good plays here or there. He certainly wasn't the Super Bowl MVP that saved the game. Michel was the guy that controlled that whole game. I don't know why they wouldn't have that same offense going into the season since it kind of won them the Super Bowl. So I just don't see White being as consistent. I see him going back to what he was, which is a wider, running back 3, in those games where they're going to be in kind of a shootout, whether they're playing, the Saints or, the Rams or somebody where there's going to be some high offense going. Then I think you'll see White be more involved. But I think, those games they're going to play against the Jets and the Bills. And I think you're going to see Sony Michel all day and White will be an afterthought.
I don't consider.
I totally disagree on that. Yeah.
Well, I don't think he's an afterthought, but I just don't think he's going to have the numbers he had last year.
It's an offense that Brady loves to throw to the running backs, right? So, my thought is if you lose Gronkowski, it's he and Edelman are going to be the 2 most trusted guys. If you put James White at 18% of the targets at an 80% catch rate, which he's been around an 85, that's 80 catches. You put him at 8 yards a catch, he ranges between 7 and 9 on his career. He's at a 650, and you just give him 4 touchdowns. Then if you only give him 70 carries, and a couple touchdowns, you're already talking 225 points in PPR. So, when I think about the way the Patriots offense works and, the way that, the offense is designed.
Wait, can I interject right there?
Yeah.
It's designed to say, screw you, fantasy owners. We don't care what you want.
Amen.
You know what? You want James White? Hey, Rex, Burkhead, get the hell in there. You want Sony Michel? Hey, let's get the fullback to carry in a couple of touchdowns.
Yeah. Hey, I'm not going to argue.
We got a new toy in Damian Harris. Oh, let's see what he can do. Man,
but
New
James
England
has
is the most frustrating team when it comes to damn running backs.
Them and Pete Carroll, the Seahawks. Because he did the same thing last year.
Well, he would. Yeah, okay, he did. I guess I did.
Yeah, he had the weeks where
really
Chris Carson go off, the next week Mike Davis
would go off. Yeah, right. Yeah, okay,
yeah. But it's not as bad as New England. But yeah.
But what I meant, Jim, is it's built around the short passing game. That's what it's built around. Tom Brady's trying to.
So frustrating.
Right.
It's getting rid of the ball quick, and those are the top 2 targets that can do that. So
I mean, just think to last year. Sony Michel out in the beginning, finally comes back. The next couple of games, he's the battering ram. James White is the pass catching back. And all of a sudden, fantasy world is like, oh, are you kidding me? New England has a set backfield that we know what they're going to do? Yeah, okay. That lasted for about 2 games, and then all of that went to hell. So, I think it's just my bias in New England running backs more than anything else, Dwayne. You could sit there with all the facts in the world. You could push them down my throat all you want, and I'm still going to sit here and go,
hey, that's okay. I have players I'm like that. I'm sure about too. That you're just like, nope, ain't doing it.
Well, since we're on that topic, I'm going to throw another one out there that I feel that way about, and I want to get your guys' opinion. I can't stand Leonard Fournette. He won't end up on any of my teams. I'll start with you, Dwayne. How do you feel about Fournette?
Well, when I think about Fournette and I think about the tier of runners he's going to, I try to be objective when I think about injuries because you know what? I don't know how to project injuries. What I do know is they've talked about his ankle, and everything I've read is that it's something that's only going to get worse over time. But as far as the next year or two, he could easily be fine and no one would be surprised by it. So when I think about him, if he doesn't get hurt, I think he has a much clearer path to 300 carries than some of the guys around him. But even though I try to get rid of that injury bias in my head, it's really hard for me to. So, I mean, when you think about the guys going around him like Kerryon Johnson, Aaron Jones, who are some of the other guys, Devonta Freeman, all those guys, I'm going to take Freeman over him. But once you get down to Kerryon and those guys, you get to Aaron Jones, you get to, there's one other back I'm thinking of that has competition. Oh, Derrick Henry. I think right in that range is where I get comfortable with him. But I've seen him go a lot of the time at the end of the second. And I'm not willing to do that there because I'd rather have someone like Keenan Allen or Mike Evans or heck, even Adam Thielen, a guy like that. I just feel like there's guys I can trust more. But I will say if he's healthy, he's got a path to 300 carries.
Oh, if he's healthy, he's a good runner. I won't take that away from him. He is. But, okay, Bob, your thoughts?
Well, you can fix the knees, you can fix the ankles, you can fix injuries, but you can't fix stupid. And that's what Leonard Fournette is. This guy's an idiot. He's a complete head case. You don't know what to expect from him from week to week. I'm not even sure he's injured half the time. I think he just wants to take a few weeks off because he's bored. The stuff that you've seen out of him over the last couple years on and off the field, is just the kind of guy that I want nothing to do with in fantasy. I don't care how talented this kid is. I don't care how healthy he is. I don't want to take the chance that he rolls off and goes off for 6 straight games and I'm thinking I'm on my way to a fantasy championship. And then next thing you know, he's sucker punching some fan on the way out of a game, and now he's out the rest of the year. I don't need that kind of stupidity. I can't fix that. I can't predict it, but I can predict the fact that this Leonard Fournette's an idiot, and I will not have him on any of my teams, regardless. Plain and simple.
That's what I always say. With Fournette, you got to worry about the 2 eyes: injury and idiocy.
There you go.
For him to run on the field and punch a guy wearing a football helmet. Yeah, that's good thinking. Cost your team that game when you get, thrown out. Cost your team the next game because you're suspended, which killed their absolute chances of getting into playoffs. Now, I'm not saying, they needed a lot of things to go right to get in, but that literally just took it right out. And that kind of.
And when he was on the field, he was only 50% consistent last year. He was 4 for 8. And so, I mean, even when he was playing last year, he didn't seem like he was really into it, or whether it was health or just, not in, just not being there. I want nothing to do with this guy.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I always find, like, as Dwayne was saying, I always, I get to that point where, you're looking at him and, even if I need a running back, there's always somebody, if not running backs, a wide receiver there that I just feel so much more comfortable with that I just can't do it. Right. I'll let people take that chance all the other time. Okay, folks, we're going to cut this one a little short. We had all kinds of issues. Tony didn't get on. It turns out that Tony ended up getting a virus on his computer from some
I
place.
think
I
we
don't
all know what.
I
think we all know why.
He's looking at that grandmama porn again.
That's right.
Um, so we're going to cut this one a little short. Besides, Dwayne has to go record another podcast. He's a busy man.
He is. He's
He
the man.
decided to jump in and join us, and I appreciate both Bob and Dwayne joining us today and helping me get through tonight's show. And of course, don't forget, this is part of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network. Get used to it, people. You will be assimilated. It will be everywhere. Bob, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you and what you got going on?
Well, of course, you can find me on Twitter at Bob_Lung every around Thursday, Sunday night. We're trying to get back to Sunday nights here. We'll be on the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast with the Fantasy Football Consistency Show, so you can learn about consistency in fantasy football world. And of course, speaking of consistency, you can get the Fantasy Football Consistency Guide on Amazon, or you can go to Big Guy Fantasy Sports and get the full access there as well. So once again, thanks for having me, Jim. Great to be a part of it. Dwayne. It was cool having you. We'll have to have you on my show as well.
Thanks, man. Looking forward to it.
So, Dwayne, why don't you tell everybody where you can be found and what you're doing next at the next podcast so they can go over there and listen to you guys?
Sure. So we'll be on with Fighting Chance Fantasy tonight. So it will be at the Tuesday Night Hustle. So you guys can look that up. And
it's Wednesday.
I know. We're doing. Hey, yesterday was my 20-year anniversary.
Hey, congrats, dude. Congrats.
Congrats.
So exactly. Yeah. I wanted to make 21 years. Okay, Bob.
Good point. I hear you.
You can also follow me on Twitter at Dwayne McFarland. That's DWAINMCFARLAND. And I write at Fighting Chance Fantasy. And I guess I can go ahead and share this. I have not been set up and given access yet, but I've verbally agreed to do some writing for Football Guys as well. So that will be.
Congrats.
Thank you. That will be coming soon. So don't know when. Here in the next couple of weeks, hopefully.
Some of my favorite people in the industry in that group right there, man. I can never say enough good things about Football Guys.
Yeah,
and they're just an outstanding group all the way around.
Yep.
Yeah, they're awesome. Yeah, and
so good for both of you. I think it's a good score for both of you. That's going to be a good thing. So I'm happy to say I lost one of my old website partners to them, and I'm still happy for him. Simon, developed an app for us that we put out on a site called Go Ahead Score, and we got it all up there and hyped. And then Football Guys came in and stole them from me. You thieves! You freaking thieves! Hey, but the man had a chance to make some money doing what he did great at, so I'm glad for him. Okay, folks, that'll be it for tonight. We are the WTF Fantasy Football Show. I am Jim Day. You can find me on Twitter at FantasyTaz, and we will be back next week, and hopefully Tony gets on the show and gets rid of his virus. Take some penicillin, Tony. We need you back. And we'll also be joined by our other new co-host this year because Brian Drake wasn't able to do the show this year. It was something along the lines of, from the wife, but it is what it is. We all go through that. But our new co-host is Mr. Mike Blewitt, who some of you probably know from FNTSY, and
right, yeah.
He was actually me, Tony, and Mike were co-hosts on Blog Talk Radio many moons ago. So it'll be fun to work with him again. So we'll be back next week, hopefully with the right crew. But I do want to say thanks once again to Bob and Dwayne for jumping on and helping me out and getting this show going tonight. Thanks, guys. We'll see you all next week, folks.
Thank you.
WTF Fantasy to the rescue. We're out.